Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Ukrainian show on Pod TV. My name is Sasha Star, and today I have my favorite Professor Jonathan Lockwood. Welcome to the show, Jonathan.
You mean your only favorite professor?
Actually, lately with what's happening on the campuses and so on, I about to start hate professors in these universities.
You'll take what you can get.
Yeah, absolutely.
Glad to be
Actually,
here as always. Yes.
In addition to Ukrainian and Russian and China show, I would like to add to this also United States. And the
Oh
reason
my
why I would like
God.
to do it, I heard very interesting comments from persons that I'm listening very, very often. It's He's doing that in Russian language, although he's 100% pro-Ukrainian and 200% pro-American.
Oh my. Okay.
Yeah, he's a former KGB agent
Ooh.
by the name Yuri.
A fellow intelligence officer. Okay. Very
Yeah,
good.
Yuri Shvets, but he's already quit KGB back in mid 90s, and so now he's actually very well esteemed contractor for many Fortune 500 companies as the security is concerned, and he is.
Can't beat his qualifications.
Yeah, that's right. So he's very well informed, and his point yesterday, I was listening to, there were criticism that United States allowed a few Russian banks to conduct international business, particularly in the oil-related business. So there were a lot of people unhappy. How come is that U.S. was a proponent of a complete embargo and so on, and now they allow, it's a handful of banks, maybe less than 10, who are involved in the trade with oil and oil products. And he went into all details, explained the reasons of when and how it happened. What he has analyzed is that, yes, at the beginning, when the war started, they were trying to engineer complete embargo on Russian banks, regardless what they're doing and so on. It was partially successful. However, a handful of banks were still doing here and there some business with China or India or something like this. In some capacities, they were opening yuan and rupees accounts, and it was kind of a ad hoc thing and very clumsy. But there was nothing else that they could do, so they were trying to uh, improve that horrible situation for them. However, what was happening at the same time is that the oil prices started to creep up, and partially was the absence of or dwindling down supply of Russian oil and Russian products, oil products. So there was some kind of a decision made because the high oil prices are very bad for incumbent president for re-election, and especially when at the beginning he's not like oil trader specialist. He's just watching the prices at the gas stations. So he's saying that at one time the prices went down to $3.25 per gallon, and that was not so bad. But now they're creeping up to $4 a gallon, and this is not very good sign for Joseph Biden as incumbent. So the decision was to allow a handful of banks, I think it's less than 10 Russian banks, to do some business in oil and oil products, so the more oil and oil products will be available in the world markets, so the prices will not go crazy, although they are already reaching sometimes around what, $90 a barrel. So 90 is sort of, it's still playable, but if it will go to 100 and over, then the prices on gas stations will go definitely to $5, if not more. And this is very, very bad for U.S. economy, for re-election chances of Biden. So now I'm not in a position to say that this was a good move because it allows Biden to be re-elected. I'm not personally, I'm not very crazy about Joe Biden and his policies. Trump has his own weaknesses, as we know now. This is trials and all that stuff. I mean, in my opinion, Trump has no danger to lose this hush money trial whatsoever. I don't believe that 12 jurors will come to the decisions that yes, he's guilty 100%. And even if that will happen, so there will be an appeal, it will go for another 3.5 years. So this is non-issue at all. The only thing what I think is that the more it drags out, and there will be witnesses like the girls, Michael Cohen, and all that stuff. So it doesn't paint Trump in a very favorable light, any way you look at it. Although I don't think that he will lose the criminal trial. And that's my opinion. And I'm not a lawyer and not pretend to be one. So, but based on all information available, at least to me, that's what I think will happen. So, Jonathan, what's your opinion on this oil business, what was described by Mr. Schwetz? And what do you think the future of that?
Well, for Russia, the higher, obviously, because oil is Russia's primary export. It's where they generate most of their revenue. So
Absolutely.
if the oil price goes, higher the oil price goes, the more revenue Russia can generate theoretically if it can sell oil on the world market at that price. So, and on the other hand, if the United States were to say move away from the Green New Deal type policies, or trying to curtail the production of oil, or trying to, or if they were to abandon those policies and freely produce oil and expand its production of oil, prices would go down, which is good for the U.S., good for the U.S. consumer, good for whoever happens to be the president at that time, whether they're trying for, if Mr. Biden were trying for, President Biden were trying for re-election, theoretically that would make him look better. But it's not something you can bet the farm on. It's the, it's,
Yeah.
and even if, for example, President Biden might be counting on a victorious war in Ukraine that might help his reelection chances. If he was counting on that, I would point him towards what happened to former President George Bush, Bush the Elder, after the Persian Gulf War. The United States had a very victorious conclusion to the Persian Gulf War, and President Bush had a very high popularity rating at that time. But then when he tried to run for re-election, the economy was starting to slow down. And as you recall, James Carville, candidate Bill Clinton's campaign manager, coined that famous phrase, "It's the economy, stupid." And so he can't successfully campaigned on that. And now if you're in former President Trump's position, he could adopt a similar policy. He could say, "It's the economy, stupid," and successfully campaign on that. And if you think that the publicity that he is getting from the hush money trial is bad, not necessarily, because it can be painted as he and his defense team and others are painting him fairly successfully as being politically persecuted. That is not bad publicity. That's good publicity. It generates sympathy for former President Trump. And that could very well, and there are signs from various political polls and indicators that that strategy is backfiring on the Democratic Party. And that could very well propel former President Trump back into the White House in November. So it's still a very open question as to, but as far as the price of oil is concerned, for the United States, it is better if we are free to produce oil at our maximum capacity, and if we are free to let the free market system operate and meet the demand and drive the prices of oil down. That stimulates economic growth. And you would have to, in order to do that, you would have to disregard the arguments of the so-called climate change, anthropogenic climate change theorists who are saying, oh, if fossil fuels are bad, they produce more carbon dioxide. To which people could logically respond, carbon dioxide is plant food. It generates plant growth. Crop yields have been going up because of the greater presence of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, which has been steadily going up over the past century and a half, since the end of the Little Ice Age in 1850. And the more carbon dioxide goes up, the more crop yields continue to increase, because if plants could talk, they would all be lobbying for more carbon dioxide.
John, but at the same time, you can say that the beef is very bad for people because the cows, they have...
yeah, because cows pass gas. Yeah.
Yeah, so what to do?
That's stretching it a bit. But in any case, the... You could make it. You can use oil for. Now, interestingly enough, the drive towards trying to produce clean sources of energy like nuclear power, re-emphasis on nuclear power, and even development of usable commercial fusion power. There are signs of that we're progressing towards that. Now, interestingly enough, that is Greta Thunberg, who, as you know, is a climate change activist. She is in favor of nuclear power and fusion power because they are clean sources of energy. And I happen to agree with Greta Thunberg, but for an opposite reason. Greta Thunberg and I are coming to agreement from opposite directions. I'm doing it on a free market basis, saying, look, if you have nuclear power and fusion power, you can now save your fossil fuels for other uses because you can do other things with fossil fuel other than just using it for energy. So,
there is also a new political situation is being developed in the Middle East. United States is trying to make a coalition of countries like United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, and a few others, and Israel, believe it or not, to work together on a substantial oil drilling and selling programs that would benefit all these countries together and the world markets. And Russians so far were very successful in resisting that. And of course, the October 7th, the attack of Hamas quite helped to derail that initiative. But now it's getting back together, and seems to me that nothing will stop it this time. Are you aware of that, John?
Wasn't totally aware of that particular development, but from what you say, if that results in greater oil production, that means lower oil prices, greater economic growth. Bad for Russia because that means less revenue that they can generate from exporting their own oil. And so that it's a very interesting development. There are always trade-offs.
Yeah, it's interesting development because if the oil prices as a result of this initiative will start going down, so there will be no so much incentives for countries like China or India to buy Russian oil because the other much higher quality oil will be available at reasonable prices, maybe even at low relatively low prices. So then I don't know what Russian can offer in this environment, because their oil is not of very high quality, and it still costs quite a bit of money. So we'll see how this initiative will develop. But I can bet that this, if it's successful, it will benefit Ukraine big time.
Oh, yes.
Because especially with Ukraine, systematically firing at Russian oil producing mm, plants, all the refineries, um, that handicap Russia ability to deliver their oil and oil products to the front, first of all, front lines, and then to their clients in
Yep.
whether India,
And the
China.
Ukrainians are continuing, as you noticed, to hammer away with their drones and long-range missiles at the Russian refining capability and oil production capability, which will.
Now, another thing what's interesting is that the British Minister of Defense said that Ukrainians have absolutely all rights to use English-produced weapons to on Russian targets. They absolutely have no problems with that. U.S. is not doing the same thing, but essentially, U.S. probably they're taking positions that look, it's a war. Ukrainians are acquiring the long-term missiles. They're paying money for these missiles, and once it's theirs and they're
They have the right to use it the way they wish.
use it any way they wish. It's quite obvious that it's the same thing that if car manufacturer will sell you a car and say you can use this car only in the south part of the city, but not in the north part of the city. No, you should not go there. Just south part of the city. I mean, if you paid money, you purchase the car, and it's up to you to decide where you're going to drive it. In my opinion. So I think right now, I think at least Americans are not voicing their concern when, how, on what targets these weapons will be used. You agree with that, Jonathan?
Oh, I agree. And United States has become increasingly flexible and willing to listen to allow the Ukrainians to use the weapons in the manner they see best. And this bodes well for the intermediate to longer term future for Ukrainian successful defense of Ukraine. And there are increasing signs, and you notice that that increasingly, even though we on this program had been one of the few to discuss, severing Crimea from Russian control, now increasingly the rest of the analysts and observers are waking up to the fact that, hey, the Crimea is the center of gravity of this entire conflict, and that the Ukrainians actually stand a decent chance of being able to sever the logistical and reinforcement link, and they recognize that Crimea is the center of the Russians' ability to project any kind of power in the Ukrainian conflict. Once control of that is lost, that is a decisive operational defeat, highly visible, impossible to explain away, and then the entire political dynamic of the conflict changes. Then the Ukrainians effectively then are on the strategic offensive.
So today is 3rd of May, and everyone is concerned in Ukraine, and not only, that Russia will try to have a decisive attack to please Mr. Putin with the upcoming inauguration on May 7th and the celebrations of Victory Day, which they celebrate on May 9th.
Well, it's going to be a close run thing, because if they try to attempt an offensive now, with the Ukraine now and the Ukrainians may already have the decisive weapons in place.
Yeah.
So that if the Russians do attempt an offensive on or about May 7th, if the Ukrainians are able to visibly crush that offensive and inflict even higher casualties, so that Putin cannot claim any kind of significant or symbolic victory for May 7th, then that will be very interesting. And I tend to be very skeptical of all these reports I see in various, the Russians continuing to push all along the front, and the Ukrainians are withdrawing, and so forth. They are, when you look at the map and you look at it very carefully, they are very minor tactical withdrawals. They are reinforcing the line. They are getting out of positions which are more difficult to defend, and those positions they are retreating to are much better prepared for defense. And so that if the Russians continue to push, they will now run up against a newly reinforced Ukrainian defense, absorb even higher casualties, and set themselves up for a decisive Ukrainian offensive counterstroke.
Yeah, exactly. So, tactically speaking, Ukrainians are waging very, very well organized defense. For now, it's a tactical defense. There is no single day in the last more than a week that I'm following it on my sources that less than 1,000 Russian soldiers were killed.
Which is absolutely stunning.
No, but it's the lowest day or two. The most likely it was 1350 to 1400 daily kills, and so it's between 1,000 and 1,400, give or take any given day. I'm following the statistics, and it's really horrible because each killed Russian soldier has family, has wife, children, or mother, or sister, or just and they will know sooner or later. They would know what's happened, and there will be funerals, and all the closest friends and neighbors, they will all come. And how much Russian people can tolerate that? I mean, if you compare it with, let's say, Second World War, when it was absolute critical situation even for existence of their motherland, and they could absorb any losses because they were fighting for existence of
right.
their
That
country.
was an entirely
What's here?
Yeah, they have the Russian people have nothing at stake for themselves in invading Ukraine, other than satisfying the desires of Vladimir Putin and certain other of the Russian leadership to restore the Russian Empire, in this case, a mythical Russian Empire. So the Russian Empire exists only in the minds of the Russian leadership, and all it takes now is, and members of NATO have all individually recognized, even if they have not issued a consolidated statement as an organization, that the conquest of Ukraine by Russia is not in NATO's interest or in anybody else's interest, except Russia's, maybe.
You know, Jonathan, I'm old enough to remember the parades in Soviet Union around, let's see, 70, 72, this years when Brezhnev was in power. So there were also celebration days like May 9th or November 7th, Russian Revolution and all that stuff. So the leader of this would say a few words or so on, and then he would end up with the words Slava KPSS, which means glory to Communist Party of Soviet Union. And everybody would reply, yes, Slava KPSS. Okay, glory to Communist Party. Okay, and that was the end, and people would go home, they would have their vodka, and
they would have a good nap.
Yeah, a good nap. And so that was really all the celebrations were about. So it was a relatively simple, relatively non-threatening process. But today is very different. People may still claim Slava to Putin and his great party. But with people actually being killed, and we are talking about well over 400,000 Russian troops were killed in this slightly over 2 years. So that's not a joke which was in the 70s when people were laughing at Brezhnev and they were saying, "Oh, okay, he'll die sooner or later anyway." But what's happened today is mind boggling. It's so scary, and how people, and of course, they're killing a lot of Ukrainians, including innocent people there. Like a few days ago in Odessa, my city town, they killed several people, including kid, and there were several casualties there. And it's a typical Putin's criminal war, where there were no military targets there, absolutely not. That was a killing and punishing of civilians, people in Ukraine. It's basically
That approach
a
is
war
backfired.
crime.
That approach backfired for the Nazis during World War II. It's backfiring again.
But with the Nazis, even with the atrocious killing of 6 million Jews, Nazis, a lot of them, not all of them, but a lot of them, they were sorry about what's happening. They were trying to hide it, and they were trying to, they were drinking a lot of vodka just not even to think about it. Whereas Russians today, they are proud of killing so many innocent Ukrainians, of raping Ukrainian people. They are proud. So there is not even comparison with them and Nazi Germans. I'm not trying to find excuse for what Germany did, but this is very noticeable fact that Russians are absolutely crazy about this developments, and they're absolutely 100% behind Putin and what his generals are doing on the front lines. And this is terrible. I think that once this war will be over, and sooner or later it will be, there will be a question about what to do with these Russian atrocities on the front lines and
Well,
not.
that will be an enduring foreign policy problem for future American administrations, as well as future of NATO as an organization. At the very least, as I have suggested, uh, what I've recommended, the establishment of a global ballistic missile defense system between the U.S. and NATO, featuring as its centerpiece an upgraded space force with an upgraded space fleet, armed with laser weapons. Which, by the way, I see increasing indications that the U.S. military has a variety of laser weapons
Oh,
already.
by the way, Israel just got some of this.
Yeah. So the interesting thing here, Sasha, is that I see an analogy between this situation and what immediately existed after the First World War. You remember that during the First World War, there were individual technological developments which by themselves looked promising, such as the airplane, the
Yes,
tank,
right.
infiltration tactics, and developed by the Germans, and radio communications, individual developments, which by themselves were promising but not decisive.
Yes,
Then the Germans, after the First World War, took these same developments, combined them in a unique and innovative way to produce Blitzkrieg doctrine, which they then tested out during the Spanish Civil War and then successfully unleashed on the West in World War II, particularly in the campaign in France. So
right.
now, in a certain way of we now have individual technological developments that have taken place, such as the maturing of ballistic missile defense technology, the development of reusable spacecraft, the development of various types of laser weapons, which are all very promising. Now, if you combine those in a unique and innovative way, you put those on spacecraft in low Earth orbit as the centerpiece of a global ballistic missile defense system, and you have a system which is capable of neutralizing the nuclear arsenals of Russia, China, North Korea, Iran, and NATO. But once that system is established, then any potential for these nations to unleash aggression against the West using their nuclear weapons arsenal as a means of leverage and cover, that's gone. They no longer have the leverage. And also it says, and so what are they going? So what will these nations do in response? Are they going to say, oh, we'll develop our own strategic defense systems? All right, go ahead, knock yourselves out, spend the money. It's not going to hurt us because our objective was not to eliminate you in the first place. You're just wasting money to no good effect. And oh, by the way, if you don't spend any money on strategic defense, you still remain vulnerable to our nuclear arsenals because our nuclear weapons all work just fine.
Yeah. Yes, Jonathan, a very interesting story was told also by Yuri Shvets about, do you remember this Russian tank Armata?
Yes.
Which couldn't even cross the Red Square. It just stopped and was never able to move. So
almost reminds me of that 100-ton tank, the 100-ton tank the Germans developed during World War II, the Maus.
Yeah.
A 100-ton tank. Is like, okay, looks pretty, but how many of you is going to be able to build, and how are you going to be able to sustain them on the battlefield?
Yeah. So Yuri Shvets said the story about the U.S. sanctions against Russian companies and individuals as well. So one of the individuals went into sanctions was actually the creator of this tank Armata. I don't remember what's his name, but he got into sanctions. So Yuri Shvets says that what a pity. The guy came up with a tank that cannot move, yet he is under sanctions. So he's got the worst of both worlds. Yeah, what a guy.
Remind me not to sign that guy up as a business partner.
That's a good one, Jonathan. Thank you very much for today's program, and have a great weekend.
You do the same.
And we'll see you next week on Tuesday, same place, same time.
Excellent.
Bye, everybody. Glory to Ukraine.